Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our Faith and OCD Conference recap, our roundtable where we're going to chat about all things the Faith and OCD Conference, but also answer questions on Faith and OCD. I know these first few moments are always awkward when it's live because folks are just coming in. So hello to the few of you who are out there, and we're going to just jump in just a second. Feel free to say hello and where you're from. And I know we always kind of ask a fun question. I feel like I'm starting to run out of fun questions here. What about favorite? Actually, I don't know that we've done this. Favorite breakfast food. So if you have a favorite breakfast food that you want to drop in the chat when you come in, and Val and Justine, I'll ask you yours as well. Favorite breakfast food.
It's tough. That's tough. I gotta say a good eggs Benny though, with a nice hollandaise. That's gotta be it.
I'm kind of a cheese and scrambled egg kind of person with some wheat toast on the side. But gotta have my coffee. I can only have one choice. It's gonna be the coffee.
That we definitely agree on. I feel like I could actually forgo a lot of the breakfast food for the coffee.
I don't honestly eat breakfast. I drink coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I should, but you know, I also drink coffee in the evening. Apparently, it's fine.
No, we all have our
we all have our cups right now.
Yeah, and I would say outside of coffee for me, I feel like, I don't know if this makes me sound really bland, oatmeal is like my favorite thing. And sometimes I'll eat oatmeal for lunch or for dinner too, which now sounds really kind of lame when I say it out loud. So hopefully we have some other oatmeal lovers out there. Okay. So we'll go ahead and jump in as folks come in. Feel free to say again, hi, where you're from, if you have a favorite breakfast food, and we would love to loop back to that. Or if you're watching this later, you can still tell us your favorite breakfast food, and we will always be happy to jump back in. So just a couple notes before we get started. This live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help to locate a trained clinician near you. And a lot of folks ask about this. There are actually a lot of different things that you can put in terms of the type of clinician you're looking for, the area, the age you are, I mean, all sorts of different things. So definitely check that out. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you're in a crisis or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the suicide prevention hotline at 800-273-8255. And finally, we want to create as safe and space as possible. We want to be kind and respectful to everyone. At the end of the day, we are all here to support one another. So just a quick note that this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and it's being recorded. So just keep that in mind as you ask questions. But again, we want this to be a conversation and we want to create a safe space. Now that I am done reading that, I see that we have lots of breakfast foods in the chat. So this is so exciting. So we have Grace at 702, big bowl of fruit. Yeah, fruit gives me life too. Grace, if I loop back down in a second, I'm curious if you have a favorite fruit. I could literally eat blueberries all day, every day. So I'm curious what you think. We have from Delaware, we have from Northern California, eggs and waffles. We have eggs and bacon, Birmingham, Alabama, Kansas City, hot oatmeal with diced peaches. Yes, I have a fellow oatmeal friend. We have Philippines, Belgian waffles, scrambled eggs and diced ham. So excited to see you from last week's conference. Yeah, Linda, we're so excited to have you on here too. And crescent rolls. Ooh, crescent rolls sound really, really good. Okay, all of this sounds awesome. And now I'm hungry and wish it was breakfast time. But super excited to jump in with all of you. So just a quick note. We're going to get in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and read the introductions of our awesome folks who are here on our roundtable tonight. And we are doing a conference recap, but we're pretty open to answering questions and just having dialogue as well. So if you have anything that you want to ask about OCD, faith and OCD, religious scrupulosity, or just really OCD, mental health in general, we are more than happy to dive into those questions too. And we're going to be tackling some of the questions from the conference. Also, star fruit. Ooh, we have star fruit, oranges, oatmeal, brown sugar, Yes, pinch of salt with the oatmeal and brown sugar. I was like, oh, pinch of salt, breakfast. Okay, interesting. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump in here. So we have Valerie Andrews, who is a retired school teacher and full-time wife, mother, and grandmother. Following her OCD diagnosis in 2011, she began advocating in hopes of bringing awareness and inclusion within her own community and communities of faith. Today, she spends the majority of her time focusing on her nonprofit, Miss Babel's Sparrows. It's a nonprofit for women of age, color, and faith. And her goal is to continue working as an IOCDF lead advocate and promoting change. So thank you, Val. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And then we're so excited to have Justine here, who is one of our newest IOCDF advocates, which is really exciting. And she is a Canadian living with OCD, having been diagnosed at the age of 20, originally from Winnipeg. Oh, I should have asked how to say that. Manitoba? Yes. Okay. She now resides in Ottawa, Ontario with her wife. She is a co-facilitator for her local goal group and is involved in 2 IOCDF special interest groups, the Faith and Mental Health SIG and the LGBTQ+ groups. Justine works in political action for a Canadian labor organization and is an advocate for progressive social and economic policies. She holds a BA in Economics and Political Studies from the University of Manitoba and an MA in Public Administration from Carleton University. She is dedicated to expanding access to evidence-based medical care by reducing stigma around mental illness and removing financial barriers to care. So excited to have you here as we chat too.
Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome you to the advocate program. So lots of exciting things. And then for folks that I might not know yet, I'm really excited, as always, to be here. I'm Reverend Katie O'Dunn, but just like to folks to know, Katie is perfectly fine. I always like to make sure I have the official title here so that folks know that clergy can have OCD and that it is okay, in fact, to talk about it, whether it's in your faith community or on live streams like this. So I have OCD. I'm very open about it. I'm an IOCDF lead advocate, an ordained minister, an interfaith chaplain, and the founder of Faith and Mental Health Integrative Services. So I get to do lots of work helping individuals with OCD and related disorders live into their faith traditions in value-driven ways while navigating evidence-based treatment. And that's the same kind of thing that we're really doing here tonight. So for those of you who were not a part of it last Monday, you were missed and we felt you in our hearts. We had our Faith and OCD Conference all day last Monday as a big part of our Faith and OCD initiatives here at the IOCDF. We're going to talk through some aspects of the conference, but first, I just wanted to ask both Val and Justine, what kind of caused you to get involved in this work around faith and OCD in the first place? Why is this work meaningful to you? Why is it significant? So Val, what prompted you to get involved in faith and OCD work?
I think for myself, there was a lack of resources that I found for myself when I went looking. I think too, there was I realized now there was a need and a longing myself for to see more people of color embrace, not embrace mental illness, but to embrace that part of our lives and to strive to improve them. So that was the driving force. It actually came about when I went to my first conference in 2017, and I was so excited because, and I wasn't newly diagnosed. I got diagnosed in 2011, but in 2017 was when I was coming out of a really bad time. And when I got to the conference, and I think I found that strictly on my own, like online or something like that, I was so impressed. But there was a bittersweetness because it was like, where are the people that look like me? You know, we're missing. And my initial reaction was, oh, shame on them. How come we're not here? But then I kind of turned that around and made it, why aren't we here, as more a responsibility and a commitment for myself? Because like I said, the resources, meeting all the people, the whole foundation itself was wonderful. And so that's why, and because I'm a Christian, I should leave that part out. And that has been a big struggle with my OCD, you know, navigating through that, that I wanted to kind of focus and try to bridge those two parts of myself and also those two parts of the community that still seem to have some invisible jump going on along the way. And so that's why I got involved. And that's why it's so important.
Thank you, Val. Thank you so much. And I love that you mentioned that impact of the conference and you kind of finding that on your own and getting into that, because that's a great opportunity for us maybe a little bit later to talk about the fact that we just finished the Faith and OCD conference, but we have some upcoming conference opportunities that we would love to chat with folks at in person, where there will be more faith and OCD opportunities too, which is super cool. So Justine, why did you get into this work, or why is this important to you?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I was diagnosed with OCD, as I said, when I was in my early 20s. But in my late 20s, it started manifesting with a bit of the scrupulosity subtype. As OCDs want to do, it transforms over time. And very textbook scrupulosity compulsions, right? Excessive praying, Googling, rumination, reading of religious texts over and over, etc. But also very textbook. I was convinced that this time it was not OCD. It could not be helped by ERP. This was distinct. This was different, and no one else had thoughts like this. So it was really in re-engaging in treatment after that relapse associated with this onset of this new subtype, where I engaged with the IOCDF. I went to the virtual conference. I attended a local IOCDF walk, and I really realized, okay, no. This is textbook, right? There are a lot of people who experience these thoughts, these types of compulsions. And so, I was really heartened by people who were willing to share their experience, particularly with sharing a bit more kind of taboo thoughts, I suppose. And so I thought if I could contribute in any way to this cause as well, that would be great. And I'll also say, just as a queer person of faith, I'm a queer Christian. It felt important for me representationally to say that people like us exist, and that obviously that has an interesting intersection sometimes with OCD. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Justine. And I'm excited. I know some folks are already starting to load questions in the chat, but I think so much of what you said, folks can relate to. And I wanted to jump up and say me too, around specifically this one is an OCD this time, because I think so many of us go through that with whatever our theme is, whether that's related to faith or whatever that is that's important to us, this feeling of, okay, well, this one's different, or mine's not really OCD, or well, this is the one thing I can't accept uncertainty about. And I love that going to the walk, you were able to say, oh, wait, OCD is just OCD, and the treatment's still the same, even if that's tough. So for folks who are listening, we're going to jump in again to some of your questions and some questions we have on here, but just a quick kind of walk through of the conference from last week so that you know what we're talking about and what we're recapping. We had the pleasure of kind of starting with an interdisciplinary panel where we had faith leaders and we had clinicians and we had lived experience. I know I was the faith leader on there. Val actually was the lived experience on there. And it was really fun to have some conversations across these different disciplines, because we always want to show that faith and mental health do not have to be mutually exclusive, and that these things can really, really work together, especially across the lines of mental and spiritual health. And then we moved into some population panels. And with those panels, that meant that we had some groups for family members of folks with OCD. We had a group specifically for individuals with OCD, where Justine was speaking. We had a faith leader group that I was leading. And then we also had a clinician group that some of y'all know, Jed Sieve and Patrick McGrath, had the pleasure of talking about all things scrupulosity. And then we closed the day with some faith-based discussion groups, which was new for us. We had specific groups geared towards specific faith traditions. And the idea around that was still OCD is OCD is OCD, and it's not about faith, but sometimes it can feel a little bit different and be really nice to talk to others who might have similar obsessions that are from a Christian faith or from the Muslim background or the Hindu background. Oh, and of course, yes, Justin Hughes, Christy is commenting in the chat. Justin Hughes was awesome. He was originally going to be on here with us tonight, actually, and sends all of his love. And Pastor McKee, who kicked us off, was also awesome. So we had just a lot of really great folks. So I wonder, both Val and Justine, whoever wants to jump in first is fine, because this is a tricky question, but if there are any big highlights for you, I know I kind of did an overview of the conference, but are there any favorite parts or favorite moments of the conference for you?
Well, I know I always love the opening statements, speeches, talks, or whatever. I always enjoy that part, particular this year, because I really felt that people were a lot more transparent and open with what was going on in their lives. For me, when I looked at it in the totality of it, I was just so pleased to see that people made space for other people's faith and places of worships, that people really found the time to listen, to learn, and not just to listen to respond or disagree with. And I just thought that was so refreshing, even for me, as someone who's a Christian, that oftentimes I get a lot of flack, why are you dealing with people of other interfaiths? And that's because, it's OCD. It's a sickness like anything else. And I enjoy it. I know myself, even speaking from a spiritual point, how much I have grown just allowing other people's ideas. And I'm not picking up their ideas or their theology, but I am picking up their kindness, their humanity, their struggles, and just the need to be shown compassion and empathy. So for me, I think overall, that is what I received personally. I felt that everybody, I won't say stayed in their lane, but rather expected everybody else's lane and went in and out without, having to put on the brakes. So that was very refreshing. Along with all the talks, I tried to go in and out of everybody's talk when I wasn't scheduled for anything, and it was fun. Everybody was great.
Thank you, Val. And I love that you brought up the interfaith piece. Folks probably get sick of me talking about interfaith stuff, but that's a really big piece of my life in working with folks who are Jewish and Christian and Buddhist and Muslim and Hindu. And I always like to really make that clear that we can all have these significant conversations. And I've learned that so much from my students. And I think starting to do this work in the OCD community, I was nervous around, well, how are people going to respond to each other from different faiths? And Val, to your point, this was such, it was a beautiful space where we essentially had 500 people online live from different faith traditions who were all supporting each other. And just how many places do you get to see that? It's pretty.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I was going to say my highlight honestly was, it's not particularly specific, but it was just the global experience of, having sufferers, family members, clinicians, researchers, faith leaders from multiple faith backgrounds together in one, virtual, albeit, but space, sharing their experiences, sharing their expertise, sharing, there's just so much wisdom to be derived from all those different experiences, from all those different faith traditions. And I can't think of another scenario where I'd get to kind of meet that cross section of folks and hear from that cross section of folks. So it was really heartening just to, even getting those people in the same room, so to speak, right away was heartening for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I spent the whole day smiling afterwards. I felt so excited and that everybody, like I said, was able to embrace. And I smiled the whole day. I think I'm still smiling.
Mm-hmm. I felt the same way. And we do see, so Justin, who a few folks just commented on, Justin is in our chat right now. And Justin, we receive and give back your fist bump. So we're so glad that you are here. Yeah, thank you. Justin, you did that way cooler than I did. I was kind of like punching the screen.
Exploded at the end. I don't know. It's whatever.
I think that's, no, totally.
Great.
And Val and Justine, you're both getting so much love in the chat too, just for how genuine you are with your experiences. So thank you. So especially for folks who weren't there, we're going to dive into some faith and OCD questions from the conference, but just to give a little bit of an overview, for anyone who might be new to this topic, we were talking a lot about religious scrupulosity. And the idea of the conference was really this idea that scrupulosity is an issue of OCD, that it's not a faith issue. And I know some folks have already mentioned in the chat that you might have had a faith leader at some point who said, oh, you just need to pray harder, or, oh, this is an issue of faith. And we're really here to tell you that it's not, and that the way to re-engage with your faith in a way that's meaningful and in a way that's value-driven is through exposure and response prevention. So just by definition, scrupulosity is this subtype of OCD, like we talk about on a lot of these streams, that involves religious or moral obsessions. And a lot of times, scrupulous individuals are really concerned that something they thought or did might be sinful, that they might be violating religion in some way, that they might be violating a moral doctrine. This can look very different in different faith traditions. But across the board, they generally worry that this might mean something about their salvation, or about who they are as a person, or about the way that God sees them. And as a result, they engage in compulsions to try to alleviate that anxiety or that guilt or that shame or that disgust. But as we know, doing those compulsions, whether that's compulsively praying or ritually washing in a way that's compulsive, or confessing, or continually reading a text in a way that's repetitive, anything that you're doing to try to alleviate that anxiety really isn't helpful. It's just feeding that OCD. So Justine, I know you went through kind of this experience with your treatment, and you talked about this a little bit. So I wonder when we talk about ERP and exposure and response prevention for Scroop, I wonder what that looked like for you, and for folks who might be saying, ooh, how do I get into treatment? What was your experience of getting the motivation to do those exposures that might have been hard?
Yeah. I mean, first off, I'll say it was not a quick or easy journey, right? These things are hard, but you do learn that you can do really hard things, and that it's worth it. But, my first couple of sessions, I took the leap of, setting up an appointment with a clinician when I first started experiencing these symptoms. And they were virtually in silence, right? These appointments, because I even couldn't name the thoughts even themselves, or the compulsions. I felt like naming them was itself maybe sinful or would cause harm to my clinician or what have you. But eventually I did kind of come to realize that, OCD is OCD. I'd experienced, subtypes previously where I was doing repeated checking, or, concerned about having hit someone with my car and driving back, various kind of harm concerns. And I realized this ultimately was the same thing. This was me being unwilling to accept uncertainty around something that matters to me, right? OCD attacks what you value. I value my faith. I value my religious community. And again, it was my brain saying, oh, well, let's not accept uncertainty in this area. And yet, a genuine kind of faith relationship, in my view anyway, is inherently, a world of the unknown, of belief, of nuance, of, investigation, not rumination. I think that's an important distinction. But it inherently demands that we accept things beyond what we kind of tangibly know. And so it was with that I realized, okay, I can kind of keep engaging in these compulsions, keep kind of almost virtually worshiping OCD over worshiping the God that I believe in, right? And engaging in my faith community. I realized that it was actually having a detrimental impact on my relationship with God and my community by engaging in these compulsions, right? That wasn't serving my idea of faith or of God. It was serving OCD. Someone at the conference actually said, I don't know who, apologies, said, someone who washes their hands 70 times a day out of a compulsion, we don't think that they're cleaner than anyone else. They're compulsing, right? So me praying 70 times a day, that doesn't make me any more devout, right, in my view, but I'm compulsing. And so it was really shifting my attitude towards kind of, again, how do I actually want to be engaging in my faith? and what's being harmed by engaging in it out of the fear that OCD perpetuates.
And I love that you brought up the who are you worshiping, or the what are you worshiping? And I know someone asked that in the chat as well. And I actually think sometime in the next couple of months, we're actually doing a specific Faith and OCD roundtable around that topic. Are you worshiping God, or are you worshiping OCD? And to your point, I mean, it feels sometimes like you're trying really hard to worship the God of your tradition when you're actually just focusing on feeding the OCD. And a lot of times people ask, what's the distinction? How do I know if this is faith or OCD? And a lot of times we'll ask, what's the function of the thing that you're engaging in? Or what's the function of the practice that you're engaging in? If it's to alleviate anxiety, or if it's because you're afraid, or if it's because you feel like you're obligated. Often that is really the OCD that you're feeding. But if you're doing something because it brings you meaning, because it brings you joy, because it brings you hope, that's really about your faith in an authentic and a value-driven way. The question I get sometimes is the fact that sometimes people do pray when they're afraid. Like if there's a plane going down, it might be value-driven to pray, but you're praying because you're afraid. You're not praying because you're afraid of not praying. And I think there's a big distinction there when we're thinking about that function. The problem is sometimes faith leaders who are really well-intentioned, and I think sometimes faith leaders get a bad rap. There's definitely some folks out there who have done harm, but there's a lot of really amazing faith leaders out there too. And sometimes folks who are really well-intentioned might not be totally aware of OCD or aware of why someone in their congregation is engaging in a repetitive or compulsive behavior. So Val, I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you have done so much work in faith communities to try to start these conversations and to try to raise awareness. And I wonder what that's looked like for you to start to talk about OCD or to talk about scrupulosity, both in the pews and to the folks in the pulpit and all of those.
And beyond the pews.
Yes, beyond the pews. I couldn't think of the right.
Yeah. I think for me, I can finally start seeing some change, a little bit of change. In some areas, a great big leap of change. I know for myself, there was a struggle for many years. And it wasn't that, I'm trying to reflect, it wasn't that I was ashamed of what I had. I just wasn't comfortable with sharing it, I think, with everybody at that point, because there was so much stigma within communities of faith. And in my particular church, when I say church, I mean the building itself, I ended up being very fortunate because it took me many months of bringing up the topic, and everybody knows I'm a crybaby. I'll cry at the drop of a pen. But all those times that I was crying and the snot was coming out my nose, and we're in the middle of not a sermon, but some functioning at the church, where finally people started listening and embracing it, and I found out that I think a lot of it was my own fear, because we bring so much to the table, so much tradition. And I think from a culturally based standpoint, I was lost in that tradition, or that ideal of, you only speak to God about certain things, the taboo of mental illness and all those kind of things. So when I started sharing and leaving little pamphlets, and I used to have long engagements talking with my pastor and the first lady, who they have been friends for many years. So I think that helped me personally. I didn't have a fear of approaching them, and it was only because we go back so far. But for me, it was once I found that people started understanding what exactly OCD is, because I know for me, when you're newly diagnosed, there's so much you don't know. For me, I thought it was either just washing your hands or being neat, and I was neither of those things. And so I think once people understand that it's illness, like anything else, that you can find some opening or some engagement starting to happen. And so I've been finding that it's still slow. I still find that there's a lot of stubbornness with a lot of the vintage people, as I will call us, uh, who are just brought up, in a different time, in a different era. And it's not to say that anybody is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is different, and this is how it's operating in my life. And that, like you say, one thing does not have to go with the other. And how much better I am as a person when I was able to combine those fears and what was going on in my life. Uh, it really helped me from a spiritual base, because I was spiraling out of control with, worried about why I wasn't able to pray it away. Janie over here can pray it away. What's wrong with me? And I know in the African American culture, I shouldn't say culture, but there was a saying that became very popular the last few years. Uh, I'm too I'm too blessed to be stressed. And I tell you, that was so convicting to me, because it was like, but I'm stressed, you know. But when I turned it around, I'm blessed despite being stressed.
Mhm.
It sent a whole different message to me as a Christian, or me as a person of faith, and also the people I were talking to. And so once we started taking those little teeny tiny steps, um, we became a lot easier to share. And that's why I kind of do what I do, because I know how um, long I sat in those pews feeling judged, feeling all alone, not knowing if I looked to the right or to the left, somebody else was struggling with the same thing. We just don't realize those kind of things because we remain silent. And so it's kind of like, once I found my voice, I don't want to shut up, if that makes sense.
And
So,
we love your voice, Val. We love that you share, because it's so important, and you're definitely getting a lot of love in the chat, because I think so many folks relate. It can be so scary to share these things. And I know I even saw a comment on that physical aspects are often, or that physical illness, which I've now lost. Oh yeah, Christy at 728 said it's a lot easier to share something physical versus mental health. And
yes.
that can be so true in faith communities.
And you know why that's true? And that's been one of the things I try to speak about. It's because it's acknowledged as an illness. People get afraid to hear of the term mental, because automatically we want to make that uh, spiritual, or, our fault. No, it's a medical diagnosis. So when you have, like I said, when I broke my foot, hmm, nobody asked me, was my therapist a Christian? Nobody asked me why I was taking meds, for the pain. None of that was questioned. And it was because it was acceptable. That's an acceptable disease or disorder. But the mental part is not. And so I say, too, maybe we should rename it, you know, and because people are just simply afraid of the word mental. That's what I'm finding.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I mean, I think in faith communities as a whole, we're starting to get more comfortable talking about mental health, but not
Mhm.
necessarily mental
Mental.
illness.
There you go.
There's such a big distinction in faith communities where, yeah, we can talk all day about mindfulness and going for a walk and deep breathing and self-care, but talking about evidence-based treatment for mental illness, people kind of still shy away from. And kind of like to your example of of the injury, I always think about it's like with, if somebody with asthma, and I think I shared this at the conference too, I always think about yeah, we can all talk about breathing, but it's like not being comfortable talking about asthma and just telling someone with asthma, oh, you don't need to take an inhaler, just deep breathe. We're all comfortable talking about breathing. Just like we would say, we're all comfortable talking about mental health, but we don't need to talk about evidence-based treatment that you
Yeah.
actually need. So we're going to go ahead and start diving into some questions, but hopefully folks feel seen and heard. And again, this is not unique to any particular faith tradition. it's also not unique to folks in faith communities. Again, I'm a minister and I have OCD, and I am definitely not the only one. For those of you that know my story, I was quiet about it for a really long time because I had so much shame about serving in a leadership role and working with kids and working in interfaith and having these intrusive thoughts, having violent intrusive thoughts, navigating religious scrupulosity and moral scrupulosity, wondering what kind of person am I? And when I started to come out about this after moving into recovery, particularly in the last year, I had an article come out in Sojourners magazine, which is kind of a faith-based magazine. And the majority of emails I started receiving were from clergy members who said, hey, I have this mental illness and nobody in my congregation knows. And what do you suggest that I do to talk about mental health without telling anybody that I have this mental illness, but to talk about mental health? And so just want folks to know that just like you might be afraid to speak up, your clergy are not exempt from this either. And they are human beings who navigate these very same things. So Grace at 710 asked, what would your advice be in regards to trying to reconnect with the faith that you might have had once before? I used to be religious, spiritual, a person of faith, but once I really started to struggle with OCD and an eating disorder, I kind of lost touch with all of the above. I really want to try and begin reconnecting with my faith and spirituality because I'm genuinely missing the comfort and peace it brought me, but I don't know where to start. So I wonder if I have some thoughts on this, but Justine or Val, do y'all have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, for me, step one, and I'll sound maybe a bit like a broken record, but, if you can, engage in treatment with a professional who treats ERPs, using ERP specifically. I will say also therapy is not therapy to the point of, specialized treatment. Someone who specializes in the treatment of OCD using the gold standard treatment of exposure and response prevention is what you're looking for. And, specifically to reconnecting with your faith, though, I do think that's kind of the baseline tool to kind of get you to re-engage with all the things of your life that you valued and that you engaged with fully, before your OCD, let's say, or at least when symptoms were not as present. And then I think also it's good to kind of try to remember what it was about your faith that you enjoyed and that you valued, and really naming that for yourself. And in my experience, at least, I found that was completely at odds with what my OCD was kind of encouraging me to do. So, I really valued in my faith the kind of good works component, if you will, supporting refugee advocacy or supporting those in marginalized communities or experiencing poverty, et cetera. And, me compulsing through excessive prayer or excessive Googling or rumination was actually taking away from time where I could engage in that kind of value-based activity through my faith community and elsewhere. So almost like actually writing out, what do I value about my faith and what is OCD taking away from that might be helpful.
And I know for me, I went through a period, and this was again pre-diagnosis, so everything is kind of looking back and learning, that I had like a 7-year absence from belonging to any house of worship, as we say, or a church, for 7 years. And when I look back on it now, I think it was more because I was looking, we had moved from one city to another, and I had left a ministry that I had been part of since I was a teenager. So I'm leaving a 20-year relationship, and I was trying to find that somewhere else, and it wasn't happening. So it's like, whatever, but I think in a lot of ways that might be normal, because sometimes we go through those changes, with our faith. It's easy to get off track just because of life circumstances. And for me, I just got to the point, almost what you're saying, I just missed it. And so I started, and at that point, I still didn't have a regular church home. So I just started going to different churches and maybe sitting and, going, over here, over there. And when I found that wasn't enough, then I started looking a little farther. But I just started from where I was at. and it was strictly because I missed it. So I think that can be a good starting point. And all that Justine said.
Thank y'all. And Grace, just for you to hear, this is not at all something that you're alone in. I would say a majority of the clients I work with around faith and OCD deal with exactly what you're dealing with. And it's kind of this piece of, okay, I've moved away from my faith tradition and now I'm engaging in ERP. How do I get back to faith in a value-driven way? What was OCD? What was my faith? And I think everything that Val and Justine said are such great places to start. And I think part of that work for you is also values work. If you're familiar at all with acceptance and commitment therapy, faith for a lot of people is a value, but even digging deeper about what about your faith is valuable, not what brings you fear or what brings you anxiety or what you feel obligated to do, but what are those pieces that you're talking about that actually brought comfort and peace? And how can you start reintegrating those in your life in ways that are meaningful without integrating the pieces that felt like an obligation? And how do you keep moving towards those things? And I think there's also this element for a lot of folks as you re-engage of keeping that same flexibility that you kept throughout your treatment, where we talk about accepting uncertainty. I think keeping that as you move into your faith. Sometimes when we move back into a faith tradition for the first time, we feel like, okay, but this is the one area I have to have certainty. But carrying your ERP principles and knowing that uncertainty can be a part of faith and that actually it can strengthen faith to say, you know what? I don't know, but this is what I believe, and this is important to me. So I talk with folks a lot about theological flexibility and not falling back into necessarily those patterns of seeking certainty, but rather finding those things that you believe for you and that are meaningful as you move in that direction. And Grace, it's totally possible for you to reconnect with that faith in a way that's meaningful and value-driven for you as opposed to your OCD.
And just one other thought for Grace, when you return, don't feel guilty, because that's something I felt like such a bad Christian. You know, I've been out for 7 years, all that wasted time and all that. And try not to allow that to happen. We all start over. The point is, it goes back to washing your hands. You could wash them 20 times. That don't mean they're cleaner. You could stay out, but that does not mean you lost your joy, your relationship, and all your faith values because you weren't in a building, because the church is in us in reality. Mm-hmm. So don't feel guilty.
Thank you, Val. We have Notion at 7:11 who says, I'm not very religious, no particular faith, which is perfectly fine. However, I have blasphemous thoughts. Then anything I'm about to do gets contaminated. How to redo or completely avoid. I have to redo or completely avoid till the next day. And then there's a follow-up comment from you that says, how do I stop these thoughts? And just for you to know that having blasphemous thoughts can be totally separate from being religious. On our new resource page, we have kind of a piece that's coming out for folks who might not identify with a particular faith tradition and still are having kind of religious intrusive thoughts. And what you're talking about sometimes is called kind of spiritual contamination, which comes up for folks often. But the question that you're asking, how do we stop these thoughts? I'd love to reframe and say that actually we're kind of going to try to do the opposite with exposure and response prevention. We don't want to stop the thoughts, which feels like it's completely in opposition to every fiber of our being. And I get it. But the idea with exposure and response prevention isn't to stop the thoughts, but to allow them to be there. And we know it's really uncomfortable, but it's to sit with those blasphemous thoughts. It's to continue to do the things that are meaningful to you while existing with them and saying, you know what? These may or may not mean something horrible, but I'm going to continue to live my life in a way that's value-driven. Now, it starts really, really small, often with your clinician. And that might mean even just thinking, I have a blasphemous thought, or saying out loud, I have a blasphemous thought, or whatever that looks like. But building up to really doing some exposures around this to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I just wanted to reframe and let you know that we're not trying to get rid of them. We're trying to get comfortable letting them be there. And eventually it won't feel the same way that it does in this moment. Eventually, when we let those thoughts be there, they're not bombarding us the way that they are for you right now. We kind of stop noticing them and we start to recognize that thoughts are just thoughts. Justine, I see you nodding. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this and the stopping thoughts and the ERP and all the things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was just such a huge breakthrough for me in treatment, was the idea that, because it's so, counterintuitive, right? Is, oh, I'm cold, I'm going to put a blanket on. Oh, I feel anxious, I'm going to try to suppress the thing that's making me anxious. But actually, we know there's evidence for it that doesn't work for OCD, right? It's actually counterproductive. So by actually saying, okay, these thoughts are going to be there. Here they are. They're there. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but this is OCD. Here it is. Making the space for them to be there and not actively kind of engaging them in a kind of rumination or looking for an answer type way, because you'll never find that answer, it turns out. Just letting them be there. It's easier said than done, for sure, but a good clinician will help you through that process. I'll also do a quick shout out. I found this book extremely helpful to me, which is Stuff That's Loud, which is it's actually meant for teens, I think, but I don't know. I'm 32 and I loved it. It's around acceptance and commitment therapy, essentially. And it's that, right? It's the willingness to just accept the thoughts as thoughts. And I would have, in particular, a lot of intrusive thoughts. I imagine others will resonate with this. But when I would be in houses of worship, in churches in particular, all these thoughts about, sin and hell and all of this, right? And so, but going into churches now, I kind of like to think, okay, I'm going to just leave a little bit of space in the pew for these thoughts. They can hang out, they can show up. I'm not really going to have a discussion with them. There's a service going on that I'd like to pay attention to, but they can sit next to me, right? And then by having that willingness and that attitude, they actually tend to show up less after a while. It does take time, it's difficult, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Justine. And they really do. You kind of answered another question that we had kind of later down the line about if you still have intrusive thoughts after ERP. And I think it's important to note that, yes, but you don't notice them the way that you are in this moment. And intrusive thoughts are just thoughts. Everybody walking down the street that you pass, they have intrusive thoughts too. They have kind of weird, strange, bizarre thoughts, because when we're having thoughts, it's just associations that we're making between things. They just most likely don't notice them in the same way that you do, because one, they might not have OCD, and two, they might not be stuck on the thing that you're stuck on. The ones that you're noticing are just the things most important to you. Like Justine said, if you make room in that pew with you during your worship service, or in the car when you're driving and navigating hit and run OCD, if you make room and say, yeah, I'm going to let this thought be there, it stops pressing on you in that same way. It doesn't mean it's not hard. I'll be transparent and say this today was one of the harder OCD days I've probably had in 3 or 4 months. And had a couple triggers, and it was not so good. And about 2 hours ago, I was like, how in the world am I going to do a live stream about OCD and pretend to have my stuff together? And I'm not going to pretend to have it together, because it can be really hard. And I know sometimes we know all the skills and the tools, but for me today, it felt so real, and it felt like this is different. This time it's not OCD. How could I possibly let these thoughts be here? How could I possibly sit with this? What does this mean about me as a person? So I want y'all to know that even when we say this, it still sucks. And it did for me very much today. I wanted to curl up in a ball earlier today, quite honestly. But we keep fighting, because we know that by letting those thoughts be there, they lessen, and we get to reclaim this beautiful life that we both desire and deserve. And just wanted to share that with you all in my own commitment to keep fighting my intrusive thoughts, and to not fighting them, by allowing them to be there and not giving into compulsive behavior, because we're definitely kind of on this journey together. So
I'm proud of you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you. It was a rough day, Val. Thank you. I just put that out into the universe.
Yeah.
So we have, let's see, let's go to, I lost the next question I had on here, but I'm going to hit some more. Okay. So at 7:17, And this isn't a question, but I think a great comment to note. I had excessive praying, avoidance of scriptures, reading of the scriptures excessively, rumination, reassurance seeking from my bishop and others. My obsession was that I lost my salvation. What a total nightmare. I really just wanted to point that out for folks to see that this is a really great example of religious scrupulosity, of something that you might be navigating, and something that you can specifically do exposure and response prevention around so that you can get back to your faith in a value-driven way. So Autumn, we are so thankful for your willingness to share your experience and for being brave. And we know that that feels like a total nightmare, but you are an OCD warrior and rock star. So thank you for just being absolutely awesome. Okay, so next question. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Okay, Roxy at 7:30 says, since I started ERP, I think I have more thoughts. Is that normal? Justine, go ahead.
Yeah, so in my most recent so I had a bit of a, I guess, relapse, we would call it, about a year ago, and, found a new clinician, and again, found the IOCDF and all these wonderful things. And, here I am talking to all of you. Not to say that it's not hard, and I still have bad days, as Katie mentioned, but this messed me up most recently because I experienced this in treatment, and it turns out there's a term for it. It's called Extinction Burst, and I will direct people to people with PhDs on this matter. I'm not an expert, but Extinction Burst is what it's called. I found a podcast about it. It was a Jenna Overbaugh's podcast. We can do hard things, doing hard things. I should know it. That's embarrassing. Anyway, Extinction Burst. It's a thing. And when you're first engaging in treatment, essentially, even though the treatment is, quote unquote, working, it can elicit an initial reaction mentally where you're actually having more thoughts and a stronger desire to engage in compulsions. And I think that's largely just because you're finally kind of trying to deal with it rather than maybe suppress it or try to, as we talked about earlier, kind of stop the thoughts or disengage from the thoughts. You're allowing them to be there. And so they come at you a bit harder initially. Not a very clinical way to describe it. I do recommend people talk to experts, but it's a thing.
Yeah, I've experienced that too after doing some work. And I think I spoke about it before. I think it was around the 26th, 27th day. It was like, this ain't worth it. And I was going every single day. My anxiety, my subtype is health anxiety. So I was going every single day, to some type of medical building, to emergency rooms. I was, sitting here and there. And I remember thinking, I'm just wasting my time. It's getting worse. Kind of what you were saying, it's getting worse. So why am I going to do this? And I remember what my therapist had said. And she had said something to me, if you find you can't go, if you miss more than 2 days, you need to find something else that's not working or something to that effect. And I remember thinking, I'm not gonna let all those 26 days that I already have put into getting well, go to waste. And it was because I couldn't see the end of the tunnel. I didn't see the light. It's kind of like you were saying, this is making me worse. Why am I doing this? And then, but I made the
I want to know what happens next.
I know. That was deeply compelling. I
know. Oh. Okay, sorry, everyone. I am. Oh no, there you go. Oh,
there you go.
Oh, you're back.
And so I stuck with it, and somewhere along the line, it just clicks. I can't tell you it took 2 more days. I can't tell you it took 5 days. What I can tell you that it took 51 days of work before I got to the point where my therapist said, okay, we're not good to go, because it's not a fix-all, cure-all. It's a step to having a better life. And she was like, we just kind of got to keep our feet wet. So I didn't have to go every day. And now I just kind of keep my feet wet. But I think that happens. and I try to look at it now as a positive uh, thing that's happening to you because you're doing the work. So stay encouraged.
If I may attempt a metaphor, and I know the OCD community loves metaphors, so we'll see how this goes. But I started running over the pandemic. Never ran before. Yeah, Katie's an expert. But I started running, so I was kind of doing a couch to 5K situation. And, you know, running a 5K on paper is simple, right? You just put one foot in front of the other for 5 kilometers. And yeah, you just do that. But of course, if I've never run before, it's actually very difficult. And that first run out is maybe the toughest in some ways, right? Because it's new. You're learning to do a new movement. You maybe haven't exercised in a while. You maybe just ate a full bag of sweet chili heat Doritos, and you're like, I'm going to go for a run now, which is a bad idea. Don't do that. Yeah, so that first run is tough. You can get to that 5K, but yeah, the initial period's a bit difficult. And so I don't know. That's my attempt at a metaphor. Mm-hmm. Take it or leave it.
It's so true. And that first step isn't going to be easy. It's this kind of built. And I think about the same thing, honestly, with running for me. I think running is such a great metaphor for how it's one of the things I always talk about, running towards my values. And it's literally because that's what I feel like. Yes. Oh, yay. Okay. Justine's wearing one of my running towards your values bracelets for 50 and 50. Yeah. So it's for folks so I'm tackling 50 ultras in 50 states to raise money for OCD. And Justine's wearing one of the bracelets for that, which the idea is that we're consistently running towards our values, whether we're in treatment or whether we're out on the course or whatever that looks like, that we're sitting with whatever those emotions and feelings are that are coming up and however hard it is. And we're continuing to move towards those things that are significant and important to us. I feel like we have so much left to talk about, and I'm mindful of our time. So I would love to give Justine and Val both. We will definitely have a lot more of these faith and OCD roundtables. And I know we didn't get to all questions, but we're going to get to these. We're going to keep getting to these in future streams. But Justine, do you have any final kind of thoughts, either on the conference or on faith and OCD, that you would like to leave people with?
Yeah, I think generally just there is hope. It can feel really hopeless at times, OCD generally. In my experience with the Scrupulosity subtype, again, it felt different. It felt distinct. It felt like I couldn't engage in ERP. I said that a lot, right? Oh, well, I can't do that exposure. I can't do this. And in fact, the answer was that I wouldn't. But in seeking out treatment, they will kind of guide you through the process in a step-by-step way, ideally in a way that is not disrespectful to your faith tradition, right? A clinician can even work with your faith leader to develop an exposure hierarchy that's respectful of your faith tradition, but is still making you perhaps uncomfortable, but not being disrespected. That's a very important distinction. And so I do just encourage folks to seek out evidence-based treatment, that exposure and response prevention treatment that we talk about. It does work. There is hope. And yeah, I think continue to engage in spaces like this. I found that helpful to hear from people who have been through it and continue to go through it, right? Yeah, similar to Katie, I do have bad days still. And, it is a struggle at times, but it is a struggle worth engaging in, I've learned, to kind of lead that values-driven life, which for me includes a faith community, a faith component. And I feel like I've actually engaged more in that part of my life as a result of engaging in treatment. So there is hope. And yeah, that's that.
Thank you. Thank you, Justine. And Val, final thoughts.
Kind of the same thing, there's hope. And when we do these things, it's not because we're trying to make the church responsible or condemn the church, as opposed to us drawing near to the church. I want to say that out front. And I think once I allowed myself not to feel guilty, as a person in faith, to go get some help, that, Jesus wasn't mad at me, or, they're looking at me over here. Once I allowed myself to almost be responsible for my own salvation It goes back to what she was saying, because we are, and to know that we don't lose those things because we seek treatment, that we're not resourcing, our beliefs. We're just seeking a physical medical condition help, and that becomes very freeing. So I would encourage people not to feel guilty. Go seek out treatment. Don't let your relationship stop you, uh, uh, and use it to your advantage. To know that you're loved and that you're worthy. My favorite scripture is from Luke chapter 12, 6 and 7, which talks about how God loves the birds and how much more he loves us. And when you think about it, birds are on every single continent in this world, and they outnumber us. So when you come to terms with all those things, that you're worth it, you're valuable, don't worry about it. God got you.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Val. And I think just final piece for me, again, thank you all for being here tonight and for being authentic and transparent, and for everyone who went to the conference. And like Justine said, we all do have days that are tough sometimes, but I think with treatment, we get to live these big, beautiful, awesome lives that God has created us to live. And we get to use our gifts and talents in the world, which is such a beautiful thing. And I wouldn't trade it. Honestly, with me, I can handle having some of these days that are tough because of this amazing community, and because of this work we get to do, and because of the way that my faith has actually increased through ERP and all of these different aspects. It's pretty amazing. And I just want y'all to know that you deserve the same love and compassion that you offer others. Sometimes I think we aren't particularly nice to ourselves when we have OCD. And whatever your faith tradition is, sometimes we tend to put that on God, and we tend to assume, well, God thinks I'm bad, or God thinks I'm not enough. And I love self-compassion practices, as I know can be significant for folks who don't know Kim Quinlan's book on self-compassion for OCD. That's awesome. But I also love the idea of remembering that God offers us compassion too. So sometimes with clients, or even for me, I'll have folks put their hands over their heart and just say, in whatever your faith tradition is, God loves me. God created me in a beautiful way. God thinks that I'm enough. God wants me to get better, or something as simple as that. And just reminding yourself that no matter what your OCD is saying to you, that is in fact the truth, and that you do deserve this big, beautiful, awesome life that you were created to live, in the manifestations of all of your faith traditions. So as we close out tonight, I did want to note that if you were not able to join us at the conference, we still have a ton of awesome resources for you online. So we just came out with this really, really exciting new Faith and OCD resource page. And I know Skyla is going to put the link for y'all. I think this has been in there a couple times, but this is really cool. We have a bunch of new resources for individuals with OCD, for faith leaders, and for clinicians. Tons of stuff there. So definitely check out all of the sections. And we have even more sections that are still coming for specific faith traditions. So keep an eye on that. But I would encourage you to go on that like now, tonight, after this live stream, because it's awesome. And just be sure to share it with your faith leaders and with your communities as well. And then also tomorrow you can join Dr. Liz McInvale and Chris Tronson for this week's Ask the Experts. You can ask questions live or submit them to iocdf.org/peace of mind. And tomorrow's research roundtable will actually be moved to Thursday, May 19th at 12 p.m. And I'll be on that as well. We're talking about, and Jed C will be on there too. We're actually talking about religious scrupulosity. So if this is a topic significant to you, we're going to dive into some of the research aspects of that there. Registration is also open for the annual IOCDF Research Symposium in July. We invite researchers and students to share data and findings from their latest OCD and related disorders research. This year's symposium will be a hybrid in-person and online event. Learn more and register at iocdf.org/symposium. And registration is open for the 27th annual OCD Conference taking place in Denver this July, which we would love to see you at. Yay! We have so much excitement. This special event is for the entire OCD and related disorders community, including individuals, family, and supporters, therapists, and researchers. Learn more and register at iocdf.org/OCDCon. There'll be a ton of great programming. And also, we just want to hang out with you. So please come and be a part of all of the awesomeness. And then finally, join us for the 1 Million Steps for OCD Walk this June and October. Find a walk near you and register today at iocdf.org/walk for a day of community, advocacy, and fun. So just as you know, this live stream is just one of many. You can see the whole schedule and submit questions and suggestions for future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. You can also check out all of the recordings of past live streams on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. And remember, of course, to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled. To be notified of when we're going live, follow the IOCDF on social media. Feel free to subscribe on YouTube. And if you need resources, as always, please visit iocdf.org. So y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this stream tonight. And just please continue to know that you are worthy of engaging in treatment, of getting better, and of living this big, beautiful life you were created to live. We'll see you next time.